The well of Japanese Doujin games runs real deep. A number of these types of games have made their way to Steam, and a select few have also jumped to home consoles such as the PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch. Countless more are destined to be undiscovered though, gems or otherwise. We think we might have found the most obscure shooting game of all time though. We 197% guarantee you've never heard its name. And this is it. Developed and published by Platine Dispositif, the same outfit who brought us classics such as Gundamoniums and Bunny Must Die, nobody in the world knows how to say its actual title. In fact, when pressed, Platine Dispositif responded with, "Oh, this is not a language from this planet, so no one knows how to pronounce it." It is officially titled with 5 underscores though, but I mean, how does that even help? So what's this all about? How does it play? And how does one even get what's going on here in the first place? Let's take a closer look. For all of the mystery surrounding this title, I don't know, if no one can say it, does it even really have a title? Yeah, let's go with game. For all of its inherent mystery, this game basically plays like a classic caravan shooter. Players will need to deal with all sorts of enemy waves and various fire types and patterns as they make their way to the end. All sorts of background elements can also be shot to release power-ups and boost the player's score, which we'll take a look at shortly, so it's really basic stuff. The controls here are intuitive as well. Using a keyboard or any basic USB controller, we use the PlayStation Classic controller for example, 8-way control moves the player around the screen, and a button or key exists to fire the player's main weapons. The player's weapons can be leveled up through the collection of green orbs. These orbs can be released from ground emplacements and various enemies. Some enemies will release more than others, while bosses and mini-bosses drop many more. Just collecting one won't do though. The player needs to collect 7 of them before the next weapon level is reached, and this can be done up to 4 times for a total level of 5. Collecting power-ups beyond maximum level will overdrive the player's shots for a brief period of time, turning them orange from blue. This is indicated by a small bar underneath the ship. With each successive weapon level, an additional pair of options will appear around the player's ship, which increases the amount of fire that they will lay down to better deal with the opposition. Not only can these options be used as a protective measure against enemy shots, they're also a central part to this game's main gameplay feature, option patterns. This is where things get really interesting. Players can select various fire patterns by pressing the mode change key or button while moving in a specific direction or while at rest. All selectable weapons can be found in a circular matrix at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. All patterns collected so far can also be seen along the bottom edge as well. As the player moves, remains at rest, or fires, the pattern that can be selected under the condition the player is in will then be highlighted. An additional slot in the corner between up and down can also be accessed while firing for a total of 6 patterns selectable at any one time. But there's not only a catch, but many layers to this. On the outset, only a few patterns are available, but many more can be uncovered by firing shots in certain spots, caravan shmup style. When uncovered, a circle containing one of the game's fictional letters will appear, and they can continue to be shot until release, at which point the player can collect them. Other weapons can be released from bosses and mini-bosses. And now for the catch. All of the patterns in the game are available to the player as they're collected, so long as the player can navigate to them. Given that only one of 6 can be selected at any time, and many more than 6 exist in the game, it will surely take a while to figure out how to even get to them from one set to another. This is a really cool concept in theory. It feels almost like a miniature puzzle game within the greater shooting game at large, but it also often proves to be quite a bit of a rabbit hole, and not in an especially good way. Players will sometimes need to navigate through many different sets of patterns to get to the one they need or feel comfortable with, and this might require the player to divert attention away from the gameplay in order to see where they're trying to go and select the pattern they need. With the kind of enemies and fire players will need to contend with, this can be very hard to do, especially in later stages. Player speed is also variable when different patterns are selected. Some allow the player to move fast, while others force the player to a crawl, which might cause problems if the wrong one is selected at the wrong time. The ship speed granted by the pattern in use is also displayed beside this matrix. The more triangles that are present, the faster the movement will be. Of course, once again, these patterns can also provide more or less cover for the player as well. Options can be destroyed by enemies and their shots, and release a small amount of power-up orbs to help the players in recovery. Of course, when options are lost, so too is the power level decreased. So players should obviously take care. With 13 main stages and a steep difficulty in addition to the slightly obtuse weapon system, it will take quite a while for players to see the end of this game. There are no continues here either. At game over, the player is thrown to an aim entry and replay save screen. Thankfully, players can also start from the last cleared area, complete with all of the weapons that have been collected to that point, which should mitigate some of the frustration that game over is sure to create. Thankfully, there are also other ways to help the player along. The green power-up orbs collected throughout the game are also a currency that can be used to purchase upgrades and enhancements, such as extra lives, weapon level pre-charges, power locks, and even weapon customizers, among others. Of course, all of the menus in this game are completely indecipherable, but the icons used do a good job of telling players what they do. There are even alternate modes to play here as well. A time attack mode as well as a single stage score attack for every cleared stage are all available for players to take on. So basically, this game is pretty interesting at the very least, and while it has some tricky mechanics that are about as well explained as the Voynich manuscript, it's still pretty fun in the grand scheme of things. As a caravan shooter though, its scoring is, well, it's just as confusing. Now, we say it's confusing, but just hold on a moment. The actual scoring mechanics in this enigmatic game are admittedly very simple. Players will get a score based on how much of the total destructible elements in the stage are destroyed, whether it be enemies or background targets. Some background targets with symbols on them will also award the player with a bonus score, as will certain enemies. There's also a bonus phase for taking out bosses. A score for time taken, enemies destroyed, power-up orbs collected, and ground targets taken out will make up the total boss bonus. But here's the thing, just like all of the text in this game, the numerals are also completely alien here. We don't even know if it's a base 10 system. With this in mind, it's really hard to know how far along the score actually is. This is also an issue in trying to determine whether a shop item is close or distant in terms of cost versus the amount players actually have. Ranking in also presents problems, as with no pronunciation available and with 28 characters instead of the English 26 or Japanese 46 for hiragana or katakana, there's literally no correlation to give players an idea of what to enter for a name. So is the scoring pointless? Well, probably, yeah. There was never a time where we said, oh man, look at my score, because there's just no sense to be made of the entire language at play here. Which is a shame, you know, because caravan shooters are fun as heck for scoring. Title Unknown here has a presentation that sets it apart from literally every other shooting game ever produced. And you know, at the very least, it's definitely a great conversation piece. Sure, its artistic and sound design are as you'd expect, but its use of an alien language for everything in the game from the score to the story, even to the music tracks, make it the most mysterious game we've ever played. Once again, with 28 characters in its alphabet and an unknown numeric base system, there will be no way anyone on Earth, even Platine Dispositif apparently, will be able to know what the characters in this game are saying to each other. It has been theorized by one of our viewers that this could be an anti-piracy measure. After all, how can you pirate a game if no one knows what to call it? Then again, with an official listing as 5 underscores, this might be a moot gesture, even if this is actually the case. The only thing we really know for sure is that the visuals are everything to be expected from a Platine Dispositif game. We really like the character design here, and its colorful starfields and planets, particularly those that employ blues and purples, are really striking. In addition to a decent amount of animation on everything from enemies to bosses and so forth, there are also neat little details like the player ship turning and using thrusters to decelerate onto new planets. Pretty neat stuff. This game also runs really smoothly for everything on screen. However, it's locked at a resolution of 640 by 480 with no way to properly scale the screen up to a larger size outside of a stretched, somewhat blurry full screen mode. Using external scaling programs like Sizer does nothing. We would have loved a huge, chunky but sharp 1080 option. And for the time that it was produced, it really should have been implemented. The sound is a step above many of the previous Platine Dispositif games we've played in the past, especially up against the original Gundamonium games. The BGM is pretty decent with a number of good sounding tunes, but the effects are, predictably, the same run-of-the-mill Doujin fare we've heard forever and ever and ever. Like, seriously, hey, every Doujin dev out there, freshen up your sound with better samples and effects already! Once again, for all of the indecipherable text in the game, the menus are actually pretty easy to navigate using icons alone. Some menu options' finer details will take a bit of trial and error to figure out though. So when it's all said and done, how does Platine Dispositif's mysterious title stack up? Let's take a look. Basic movement and firing is super sharp and responsive, but the labyrinthian weapon system is less than efficient, especially when dealing with so much action on screen. Challenge-wise, players will find that this game is extremely hard, even with unlockable enhancements like extra lives, weapon power, and shields. When it comes to this game's length, there are all kinds of stages here, as well as multiple game modes and extra enhancements that can take a while to build the funds to unlock. Visually, this is a great-looking game with good backgrounds, good enemy design, and great character design to boot, but it absolutely needed a larger window or a properly scaled and aspected full-screen mode. It's just so tiny! The sound in this game is also quite good, with the exception of all of the cliché Doujin effects everywhere. We're getting sick of a lot of these subpar effects. There's kind of no excuse for it. In terms of ingenuity, the weapon system at play here is actually very clever for the amount of different patterns that can be amassed throughout the game. It's just not terribly efficient when a ton of weapons have been collected. Meanwhile, the insane choice of presenting an entire game in a language no one in this dimension knows also takes guts, but could frighten players off. This game can be purchased online for about 1,400 yen, or around about $14, so it's not terribly expensive for a physically produced title. This presents a great value in the end. This has been a game we've always been intrigued with, and very obviously there hasn't been a ton of press about it. Very little media exists, so we knew it definitely needed some extra attention, if only due to its inherent obscurity. In the end, Platine Dispositif's mysterious game gets a 4 out of 5. You can get a copy of this enigmatic game at Akibao for about 1,400 yen as of this episode. That's it. That has to be the single most obscure shooter we'll ever cover on Bullet Heaven. What other obscure titles could there possibly be? Let us know below. In an effort to address a bunch of shooters that we've already taken a look at, seeing released on other platforms, we're doing a rapid-fire update video. Are they different in any way? Are they worth the double dip? How many will we cram in? Find out on the next episode of Bullet Heaven.